All right, right before we start this video, I just want to say that I'm going to be pronouncing it Kveik. That might not be perfect. I know there's a couple different ways to say it depending where you are, but it's easy enough for me to say and it sounds right, so I'm going to go with it. Hello everybody, my name is Joshua Garcia, and today we're talking about Kveik Yeast. I know I'm like super late to the game on this. There's probably like 100 videos out there already, but we're gonna keep it short, simple. So if you're using this for the first time, you know why you might use it, how to get the most out of it, and I can share some of my personal experiences with it. And if you haven't used it yet, it's an amazing yeast, and congratulations, you're the same as me, just putting it off for way too long and not using this yeast. Okay, so the main overview of this yeast, and really the only thing you're gonna care about, is that it's fast. It will rip through your fermentation in under 4 days. Usually with brewing, we have to wait for so long. You know, it could be 2 to 3 weeks of fermentation, and then if you're bottling, you're going another 2 to 3 weeks with carbonation. So it could be like a full month and a half until you can drink your beer. If you're able to do Kveik yeast and then keg it. I brewed my beer on Sunday and was able to drink it on Friday, which was the most ridiculous thing to me because I don't think I've ever experienced that before. So that is why this yeast has grown in popularity, because I don't think a lot of people want to have that patience. And I mean, the patience is great with home brewing, but there is a part of all of us, I would say, that we want to drink it a little bit sooner sometimes. So the Kveik yeast is a superhero yeast that just allows that to be possible. And the Kveik yeast strain produces a very clean flavor. So when you're brewing with it, you don't get any of those off flavors. I've pushed some of my fermentations of other yeast strains a bit fast and tried to speed up the process because I didn't want to wait so long, or I was trying to get it ready for something. And it always produces like a little bit of off flavors. You know, those off flavors need to either be absorbed again into the yeast cake at the bottom when you're fermenting, or you need to kind of go through a slower fermentation to make sure that they don't come out as much or as heavy. And with it being so fast and clean, it really works well for lighter colored beers, Berliner Weiss, maybe a pale ale. Hazy IPAs are great, IPAs just in general, because this is going to have some fruity notes to it as well. So while it's crisp and clean, it's got a bit of fruit behind it, so that's going to pull it out of the spec of wherever you want for a lot of maltier beers. If you're going with like ambers, stouts, and things like that, you might find some use for those fruity notes, but for the most part, you're going to keep it to the IPA side, the hoppy side, because you're using more of the fresh, fruity, citrusy hops in there, and this yeast is just going to make that taste even better. So for this brew, I went with something very simple. It's actually not my recipe, it's somebody else's. The base malt is very basic. It's a grain bill of mainly just 2-row and then a little bit of Cara-pils in there. Super light color, very, very standardized, but a lot of hops to go with it. And buying the hops in bulk for this one, went to Yakima Valley and got, I think, a sample pack that came with the ones I was looking for. And then those all came like 8-ounce packs, and great deal. So side note, if you do buy your hops in bulk, get one of those food saver things. You can vacuum seal your hops up, keep them in the freezer, and they will keep for a long time. I mean, I've kept them for very many months. So it's great investment because you can buy a lot of hops and then keep them on hand for your brew day. Now, diacetyl is the off flavor that comes from fermenting quickly, but this has very low diacetyl in it, and diacetyl will really kind of murder your dry hops when you put them in. So having low diacetyl is very key to a dry hop IPA, and that's why this type of yeast is perfect for a dry hop IPA. If we go for a more standard, USO5 type of beer, and we put dry hops in there, we have to make sure that we fermented very slowly in the beginning because we don't want that diacetyl to kill those hops. But in here, you don't have to worry so much, and again, you're just moving at such a lightning pace that you basically ferment for a day, open it up, throw your hops in, and close it up, and then 2 days later, you're going into the keg. I mean, it's very quick, and you get a hazy, dry hop beer from this. It would seem that probably the hardest part of using Kveik yeast is keeping it above that 90 degrees. Normally, we're trying to keep everything low. We have it in the cool closet, and we're trying to keep it between 60 and 70, and we're more or less focused on trying to keep things cool rather than warm. But here, we're actually trying to keep the beer above 90, maybe even close to 100. And that can be difficult, especially depending on the time of year and where you're at. You know, if it's in the summer and you got a hot garage, like, you're going to be fine. Go for it. You should be able to keep it at 90. So this is going to be a great time to brew in the summertime. In the winter, it might be a little bit harder for you, but I imagine you can still find some things to do. One other YouTuber that I saw did put it in their bathtub and just kind of kept filling their bathtub with hot water every now and then to keep that temperature up. You know, definitely something you can do. You might be able to put it in a water bath with a bucket heater. I think those things keep your water at like a 100, a little over 100 degrees, and so that would probably keep the fermenter around there at 100 as well. So keeping it above 90 degrees it shouldn't be too difficult. I imagine, you know, there's plenty of information out there. You're going to find what works best for you. If you do have an anvil foundry like I do, though, I decided to ferment straight in the kettle of the anvil foundry. There was nobody online that said I really couldn't do this, so I figured I just had to try it out. And it worked. So if you have an anvil foundry like me, I'll just kind of show you. Some other ones might have this as well, but where they put the recirculation pump is a tiny hole in the lid. And I found that buying one of those rubber stoppers for the airlock fit inside of that. So now I have an anvil foundry lid with a rubber stopper. We got the rubber gasket on the inside as well, which helps keep everything out. And yeah, that fits. So when you take your airlock and put it in, it's pretty tight. And that created a really hard seal, and sure enough, the fermentation happened in there. So this was my workaround. I decided to fix the lid to the top with an airlock in there, and I kept it at about 10% power and like 93, 95 degrees, and it worked. I mean, 10% power on 120 volt, I don't think that element at the bottom was getting so hot that it was going to scorch what was ever down there. And which is what I was my main worry. I was like, I'm gonna have a lot of trub and yeast cake down at the bottom. That hot element could scorch or burn or kill the yeast before it gets a chance to fully ferment. But it didn't seem to have that issue. Again, at like 10, 15%, I think I did 25% once. So it was pretty stable through all of that and would get it from 85 to 92 or 93. I wouldn't leave it going while I was at work. I was just a little afraid of it. But when I come home, I'd turn it back on, and it would take a couple hours, but it'd get back at 93 degrees. And sure enough, once it got there, the yeast was just bubbling through again. So it would kick on, and I only need to do that for a few days. So I'm really happy with the anvil foundry and how it allowed me to kind of keep it above that temperature and get it all fermented. I will say it did take a little bit longer for me than I expected, hearing everybody say that it was done in 24 to 72 hours. Mine, I think, went a little bit farther than that, almost to 4 days. And I would maybe blame that on the yeast. I could only find one that was 4 months old when I went into the homebrew supply shop. Now, according to the manufacturer, within 4 months is totally fine. They guarantee their yeast up to 4 months. So I was right there at that date. I mean, it was probably 3 days before that 4-month deadline. So they said they guarantee it, and you know, I have no reason not to trust them, and I didn't have the ability to do the yeast starter, so I just pitched it straight in. I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe the yeast cell count was probably just very low, and so that initial day of getting started and getting going probably just ate up a lot of time for me, because once it got going, the airlock was bubbling like madness. It was just after I had done it at 92, it was like the next morning, and I was just kind of worried because it wasn't going still. Left for work, came back, and then it was going like rapid. So make sure you get fresh yeast. Do a yeast starter if you can. I don't think it's really recommended, especially with Imperial yeast. I mean, something like this, you probably don't need to do a yeast starter, but it can take a little bit of strain off of the yeast and just kind of make sure that you have the proper cell pitch count, or just make sure you get a fresh one too. You know, unfortunately, I just didn't have any other things to choose from. One thing I think I did wrong is I didn't strain it at all. I should have strained a very minor amount just to get the hop leaves out, the little chunks of hop leaves. I wanted a hazy, so I just kind of kept it completely unfiltered. That might have been the wrong thing to do. It's gone away, but there was a bitter burning from, I think, some actual whole hop residue that was kind of sitting at the bottom of the keg that was getting pushed into your glass. So the first few that we pulled off, I was like, wow, this has got like a burning bitterness to it. You know, almost like eating a hop straight up. And I think that's what it was. So using something like cheesecloth to just pull out the larger chunks seems like a good idea. Again, now that all of the larger pieces that settle to the bottom are out of the keg, each one is a clean, crisp, and amazing dry hopped IPA. So something just changed in that section of it, and I know it's that. I know it's just that there's larger chunks of the dry hop that just kind of settle to the bottom, and you know, you're drinking it, and it's just extra bitter. That's what it is. And there you have it, a quick rundown of the Kveik yeast strain. If you are using this yeast for the first time, I hope that was helpful and gave you kind of an overview of what you're going to be looking at seeing. If you have recipes for me to try, let me know, because I am loving this yeast strain and want to try a bunch more beers with it. So share those down with me in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Cheers.